All right, if everybody will get seated, and we'll call the meeting of the Election Advisory Committee together. The first thing we want to do is pledge allegiance, and David Cushman, you look like a real patriotic person, so would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. It's my shirt. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. We have, is the alternate for district, is that? Oh, it's Supervisor Ding. Is there an alternate for Supervisor Ding? There is not, but I guess we have a quorum. Is there, 1, 2, 3, 4? We have
And
someone
then,
missing.
Chair,
There
if you'd
should be.
like, you have an it's the
Patricia
alternate
Barrett,
for
who is
District
her alternate? Patricia Barrett? District 1? All right. You're up to bat, Christian, so you are officially one of the voting members now. So that takes care of roll call. As far as approval of minutes, everybody should have had a copy. And of the April 11th meeting, is there any additions, corrections, or deletions that anybody has?
Through the chair, I had 2 items on here that I noticed. It was listed that I was going to provide a comment in response to the presentations from last meeting at this meeting. And as I remember, I believe you instructed me to hold and until the presentations this evening, you would have me present after that. So I just wanted to clarify because it looks like I've expected to have something from last meeting and I didn't provide anything because of the direction that was given.
Okay, and what time would that be that you're on the agenda? We're looking at the agenda now.
from what I understand, when we had the last meeting, you instructed me to wait until we get presentations at this meeting, and then I would be presenting on the 2 different meetings.
Oh,
So
okay.
September, I'm guessing.
All right, if there's
Okay.
no objection from anybody then, or any of the members, we'll approve the minutes as submitted. And I'd like to just, as far as setting the agenda, there are 2 number 3s, and so we'll call the first consent items 3A, and discussion items will be 3B, so we won't have 2 3s.
Chair, before you move on to the consent item, did you want to get a motion for the approval of the minutes? And it's up to the committee, but did you want that to be subject to the amendment that the ROV just proposed?
Thank you for your help. Yes, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Yes, as corrected. That would require one of the board members to make a motion to approve. So moved. Yes, thank you, Pamela. Is there a second? Aye. Second, the motion has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. Now we shall go to the consent items. And the first thing under 3A, as I've renumbered it, is update from the Registrar of Voters Office. And there is some material that she handed out to all of us. And I have one question. Did everybody receive the handout material? Good. All right, thank you.
Through the chair, did everyone receive the email that was sent out by our office? I wanted to make sure that we have correct emails on file for everyone. Yep, okay, good. Thank you, sorry. So just a couple things I guess I can run through quickly on the memo. Upcoming board items are addressed here for you to review. An update on the poll worker election officer, the election officer training and polling place location update. Then we have the voter roll maintenance with Experian True Trace that I had mentioned in the last meeting. And so this was just an update on those items. With it being on consent, it's there for your review. So thank you.
Anybody have any questions? If not, then we'll move to item 3B and the drop box recommendations. I'd like to entertain a motion that we adopt that recommendation so we can get discussion going. Does anybody make the motion to adopt that drop box recommendation?
I make a motion to adopt it.
Thank you, Christian. Is there a second on that motion? All right, seconded. Then let's, so we're going to open it up to discussion then, and,
May I ask a question?
sure.
Nicole, are you writing the minutes for the meeting, or just, 'cause I saw you writing down, I just wanted to. Are you? I can, yeah. I just noticed you were writing them down, so that's why I asked. But I can. If you'd like to. Either or works, yeah.
We have that settled now. She's been relieved of her minute-taking job, and David Cushman will be taking the minutes. All right, drop box recommendations. Does everybody have that in front of you?
Chair, I'm sorry, I think you have did you say you had a pending motion? Was there a first and a second?
Yeah, it was made and seconded
Okay,
To-
are you,
to
Good.
recommend adoption of
okay,
this,
Are
and
you
we're
going to take
now
a
to the
vote?
discussion
okay, prior
of
to
that
the vote?
motion.
Okay, prior to the vote, you want to discuss?
Yes, I
Okay,
think we ought to
Okay,
discuss this if anybody has any questions. And if there are no questions, that'd be an easy thing, just to call for a vote of the adoption, but I'm giving you an opportunity if anybody has any questions. As we do have our resource person here.
I have a question.
Holly Moore is available to help us for any questions.
I was somewhere in the stuff that was sent with in the emails, it had a time for the Dropbox, and it said, you know, certain hours that the Dropbox would be open. And I was curious what those hours were going to be, if there was a recommendation for that.
I didn't read that in there. Holly, even though we have an alternate that's is asking the question. Do you have an answer for that, Holly? Can you come up and help us out?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for asking that. I did not include that in here. However, I did include it in the presentation that I made on the drop boxes, that they would be open government hours, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. So if you'd like to add that, this is, up to you as a board member, what you would like to have included in that.
Well, I was just curious, because I thought drop boxes were often used for those who worked those hours, so it was a convenience for them to drop it after work. So if there was additional hours after 5 o'clock for people to drop.
They are certainly open longer than when people work, and Holly, what was your, did you have an actual suggestion?
I did not include the time frame in that. However, you're more than welcome to add what I had put in the Dropbox presentation. One Dropbox must be open 12 hours a day. So just the one, and then all the other ones could be 9 to 5. And then, of course, people can put them in regular USPS mail anytime that they want. So, and those are open all the time too. So, it's not more convenient or anything for, yeah. So they could use just a regular post office box, which they've done, which people have been using more this last election, as a matter of fact.
All right, thank you. If there's no more discussion. I have a question. Yeah, question?
Yes. Thank you for staying up there. Do you know what the impact would be if we were to reduce that many drop boxes as your recommendation?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying use only 13 drop boxes versus 25, if I'm correct.
Right.
Do you have any idea what the impact would be on the voting capability?
Well, based on our population, we're only required to have 13.
Okay.
So that would be what is
What the
required.
requirement is?
Yes, yes. So that's required by the state of California, yes. So
Okay.
we have more, but it wouldn't have any impact.
Yeah, okay. That was just clarification, more or less. And then I have a question for the registrar, if I could, for real quick. On your proposal, she'd probably know the answer to this. One of the recommendations is about the number of votes that are in those drop boxes. And there's obviously a maximum, correct? And some boxes apparently had more than that. Can these boxes be stuffed more? I mean, just because let's say they had a capacity of 100, but then you found 150, I'm using as a smaller version. Does that necessarily mean that those 50 extra votes were not legal or legit, or they just got pushed in there because people wanted their vote in?
If they can get it in the box, then it would count. The assumption would be that it is it is a valid vote. To be clear, from my understanding, we did look into this, and we picked up several times on election day, and so these totals appear to be the grand total from the day and not just from one pickup. We were looking into that, so that was some information that my office gathered, that because there were more than one pickup on that day, that total is for the total day, not just for one pickup. So that's the only information I have on it.
Is that why it looks like there's a max beyond? Is that it?
That's my understanding from the research staff did, yes.
What is your description of a full day? 8 a.m. to midnight, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning?
They're picked up 3 times between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on election day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after that, they're still open. They're being dropped into the drop boxes?
I'm not understanding the question, sorry.
Drop boxes where they drop their votes can be done after 8 p.m.?
Not on election day. 8 p.m. on election day, the boxes are locked and all the ballots are removed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question? Of all of the ballots that were put into a drop box, no matter when or at what time they were put into a drop box, were those ballots treated similar to a vote by mail and subject to the same scrutiny?
A question like that ought to be addressed to the registrar of voters.
can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Of all of the ballots that were put into a drop box, no matter what time, day, were they subject to the same scrutiny that is handled in the same manner as a vote by mail ballot?
Absolutely. Every vote by mail ballot, whether it's returned in a drop box, the U.S. Postal Service, or handed over our counter, is treated in the same manner.
Thank you.
And just a reminder through the chair, I will be coming back to present on this stuff for you at the next meeting, so I can probably be a little more comprehensive in my responses at that time.
That's okay, we have enough information here. If there's no more questions, I'm going to call for a vote and to adopt this election suggestion. And you have the 3 points there: to install 13 drop boxes instead of the current 25 that are in place. Drop box should be located and recommended at fire stations and police stations. Ask the Sheriff's Department to investigate fraud that may have occurred at drop boxes with a capacity of 1,504 ballots and recorded as having 3,300, 2,200, 1,700. The numbers are in your backup material. So I'm going to call for a vote to forward this as a recommendation from this committee to the Board of Supervisors. I hear a motion.
I make a motion to adopt this, yes.
Second on the motion? I'll second it. Okay, it's been made and seconded, and we've had discussion, so I'm going to call for the vote. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any noes? Motion passes unanimously. Under our 3B2, our recommendations that have been presented in great detail by David Robb, and he is here as a resource person if we have any questions. And I'm sure because all of you have gotten the material, you're all prepared to discuss this in detail if you want. But I would, to start the discussion, entertain a motion to recommend that we make a recommendation to the San Joaquin Board of Supervisors to improve election integrity in the county by adopting these recommendations. And the rationale is in your material that was provided to you prior to the meeting. So I would like a motion to adopt these recommendations.
I make a motion to adopt it.
There's a motion made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by David Cushman. All right, we have a motion made, and prior to calling for a vote, I would like us to take the time, because that's why we're here. If this committee has questions, to ask any questions now. We have a resource person who's standing by in case you need any further detailed explanation. And so now's the time for discussion. Is there anybody that has any questions or discussion? Are we, oh, I thought we were talking about vowels in this presentation. All right, we're good. David Cushman, you have the floor.
Is it possible to ask a question of David, Rob?
Absolutely, that's why he's here, for a resource person. David, do you mind standing at that podium and making yourself available?
Okay, so number 4, the supervisors should commission a parallel hand count of the election to be conducted simultaneously with machine tabulation of ballots. I apologize if it's mentioned in here and I haven't seen it yet, but have you estimated if a hand count, if it's taking place at the same time as the machine, if one particular method of counting takes longer, shorter? Is there a time discrepancy between either one?
Are you speaking of a discrepancy between the machine tabulation and hand tabulation, or between different methods of hand tabulation?
Between the hand and the machine, if one takes longer, if one takes less time, or as an estimate?
I don't have specific information on that, but I do know that the hand counting methods, the modern hand counting methods, not the obsolete ones that have been suggested before, take very little time. And from other places, particularly Missouri, where they have done hand counting, it is at least as fast as the tabulation systems, the machine tabulations. So they've been able to get full elections in a state in one day.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I do have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can you provide any examples of within California or around the country where they do have hand counts?
Yes, there are actually several, but the one that I've had most familiarity with is from Missouri, the state of Missouri. There is a method that they have developed, we're calling the Missouri method, that is very efficient, very effective, has zero error rates because it uses things that are the equivalent of double entry bookkeeping for error detection. And in terms of time, it's actually can use volunteer labor and is very quick. It also, even for paid workers, is somewhere between a third and a half the cost of the machine tabulation systems that they had been using before. So now most of Missouri is using the hand count method, and it's been very satisfactory. There are other states as well, but that's the one I'm most familiar with.
Any more questions, David? Anybody else have any questions? I do. Yes.
Okay, I wanted to, on your number 3 item, I believe it is, and you talked about local auditors or local volunteers
Yes.
audit. I'm not sure that I would agree with like the term local auditor, but more of election auditor. And so my question really is to Olivia. Do we do any kind of auditing through a third party, independent party to help with the process?
We do not. The California Election Code speaks very specifically that the elections official shall conduct logic and accuracy testing prior to the election, and then a 1% manual tally of 1% of the precincts post-election. And our office currently does both of those practices as stated in the Elections Code.
And so the manual counting is hand counting, looking at it?
Hand counting on 1% of the precincts, yes.
Okay. I think that's it I have for now. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's why we were here.
Okay, piggybacking off of that, if I can ask the registrar. So you mentioned what the state requires you to do in that instance. Is there any prohibition, or are you disallowed from doing further audits beyond what the state requires?
We are very limited on who can have access to those paper ballots. There is rules and regulations around that, so it's not just a matter of just letting, like, I can't just take all the ballots and drop them off to some auditor. It doesn't work that way. So those have to be in chain of custody is required, and they have to stay within our suite. And as far as I know, outside of what we do and then sealing the records, there's not an instance that I'm aware of where anyone in California is able to do a third-party audit of any tabulation.
If it's conducted in your office with local volunteers, is there anything specifically prohibiting that?
So it currently is. We do pay staff, so we don't bring in people just to volunteer. We do pay staff, and we bring in over 80 temporary workers that help assist with this. So we always have a new mix of folks that are involved in this process. I'm not personally doing the audit. It's a mixture of our permanent staff and anywhere from 50 to 80 temporary staff that are assisting with that. So the people that are doing this is very much that, and any election officer that's staffed through our process, if they want to come in and observe that, it's always allowed. And our audits are all done under camera in our office. So at any time, anyone that wants to see that, they can see what the process is to verify that the audit is truly happening and it's very unbiased.
May I comment on
Just,
on this?
No,
yes, we would like to hear from you.
Okay, yeah, when I speak of an audit here, I'm speaking of something that is much more comprehensive than simply looking at the ballots. The ballot inspection is just a tiny part, and frankly, I have concerns about the 1% and the manual tallies being inadequate. But really, a comprehensive audit does cover the systems, procedures, the methods that are used in conducting the election to ensure that the whole process is capable of delivering an accurate, trustworthy, and honest set of results. And there are some good references available, people who do election audits. These are the sort of things that almost any good auditor, it doesn't have to be specifically an election auditor, would do in conducting any kind of audit. Many of us are familiar with the things like the IRS audits, but there are also financial audits that are conducted for various businesses simply to verify to whomever is interested that that business is capable of operating properly. The same thing is what I'm suggesting here for our elections. We want to make sure that the elections are elections that we can trust. And that's what an audit does.
Yes, David.
Can you point to any jurisdictions in California or throughout the country that have done an audit like you've described?
I don't have specific knowledge. I do know that there have been various kinds of audits done. Michigan has had one, Pennsylvania, a few other places. There are some books that are available that describe good audit practices for elections, and those I could recommend later.
Yes.
Sorry, I just remembered my other question. I'm sorry. On number 2, where you were talking that that we must follow California law regarding the internet and what have you, did you find that there was a flaw in our system?
I don't have specific information that there's a flaw in the system, but for example, poll pads particularly are concerned, and those have in the past been connected to open access points. We have testimony, I've received testimony from people who have set up the centers where the poll pads have been connected to say a school or a church access point to get access to the internet. Regardless, internet has been one of the major concerns for a variety of reasons. I have a fair amount of background in communications, digital communication systems, and I do know that any internet connection or capability for internet connection is an extreme vulnerability in almost any system. We're all familiar with systems that have been hacked. There's virtually no major system, including things like the DoD and other 3-letter agencies that have not been hacked in one way or another through the internet. There was a pipeline a couple of years ago that was shut down in the East Coast because of internet hacking. There is a reason that law exists in California, and we need to be able to trust our election systems. If they are connected through the internet, I can say categorically they are not trustworthy. So,
I have a couple of questions, but I want to
Yeah.
give the committee time to ask questions.
Mr. Chairman,
All right.
I don't have any questions for Mr. Robb. I do have some general comments that I would like to make before the vote is taken.
All right, this is discussion. I want to know, under 2, how do you ensure that no equipment used in any aspect of election is connected directly or indirectly to the internet? How do you ensure that?
there's no way of absolutely ensuring it, but there are methods. For example, wireless access points can be monitored. I actually happen to own a small sniffer that doesn't tell me what is being communicated, but it can tell me if there is internet connection. That can be used wherever the election equipment is available to see if there is communication. The systems, the networks particularly in the ROV office or in the airport location can be inspected to see if they are network connected to something that might be able to access the internet. One of the particular vulnerabilities is laptops, for example, that are brought in connected to a local network. Also, there are the possibility of the little flash drives that have malware on them that are plugged into something that is network connected. Those kinds of things can be monitored and watched for and essentially prevented from being there. But it is a pernicious problem and very difficult to actually prove, but it is essential. The communication speeds today in networks are such that even a fraction of a second is long enough to inject substantial malware into a system. And that malware doesn't have to be immediately active. It can be dormant for a long period of time until it is activated, perhaps by even such things as a particular ballot with a pattern of choices present on it is passed through the system. So it's a known problem. It's a very difficult problem, but it is very important if we want to use electronic systems and have any assurance that they are indeed accurate.
I'm kind of a lay person here as far as I would know what a sniffer is. And and how do you ensure that there is no equipment being used? It's a tough thing, and I'm wondering about that. And number 3, the sheriff's office and relevant county officials can provide oversight of the audit team. This independent audit team, I'm guessing naively, is going to have to be fleshed out. Who's it going to be if you want to have an appearance of independence in looking at the stuff? We'd have to work out a system that's a little bit better. In looking at the other recommendations, I don't have a problem with them, but I'm reluctant to go forward with 2 and 3 until we do some more work on it. I'm not saying that we disapprove it, but perhaps we pull it from the recommendation and study it further, because we're going to have to have more substantive things, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do, and if I might comment on that. Actually, the two do go together, because a good audit, good comprehensive audit, would actually look at things like the internet connectivity. As far as standing up an audit team, I would expect that we could get a number of volunteers within this community who would be willing to dedicate time and effort to being auditors. We have a number of CPAs that have been trained in various audit practices. It really is nothing outside of their general domain. There may be a few specific items that are election related, but really it's just good audit practice.
All right, let me just interject. We're making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. I can assure you, without bad-mouthing any of them or collectively, that they're not going to do anything. They're going to staff it out, or they're going to want us, public citizens, to say this is the way we think it should be done. So I feel like we have to fill in a little bit of the holes on this thing, because it's a general, we recommend supervisors do this. I know how that works. And so they'll staff it out to the registrar of voters, and she'll say, we don't need a separate audit or independent. So I think we have to work out the details on those two for sure. It'd be my recommendation, unless there's an objection from the committee, to pull 2 and 3 and vote on 1, 4, and 1 and 4. And so that's the point I'm at right now. And,
Through the chair,
yes,
may I add that number one, we are using Experian True Trace, and we are in the process of doing that right now as we speak. So I don't know if that already suffices the ask of number one. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
thank you. And how about 4? I'm sure you would want to take that off too. I'm going to
Honestly-
leave 1 and 4 unless there's objection or a motion to the contrary. And I'd like to call for a vote on forwarding 1 and 4 to the Board of Supervisors as a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman,
Barry-
before
I'm
you
s-
take the vote,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you had a couple comments, but beyond that, you had a previous motion with the second. So if you want to do a friendly amendment to that motion with respect to what you're
It'd be an amendment to
proposing,
that original
or
motion.
you can have it pulled and just propose a new amendment.
Yeah,
Excuse me, a new
I am
motion.
proposing a new amendment,
A new motion. You
on
would,
1 and 4 instead of, yes, my alternate.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sympathetic to the comments of the ROV, and I previously talked to her about the Experian True Trace. They do have third-party entity already reviewing that, so it seems to be that number 1 is redundant. And as for number 4, the hand count, that not only seems redundant, but we already have a lengthy process in place. The timeliness of getting the election certified, if we had a hand count, I think San Joaquin County might be the laughingstock of California to not be able to meet the deadline if we had to do a hand count of every ballot.
Anything else? All right, David, I'd like you to respond to number 1. He says it's redundant. Can you point out how it's not redundant? 1 and 4?
At one level, I will say, yes, it is redundant, but there is a purpose to that redundancy, and that it is a cross-check against the machines. One of the biggest concerns across the country, not just here in San Joaquin, but across the country, has been the accuracy of the machine tallies. A hand count is an independent verification or validation of any machine tallies. It does prevent the kind of objections that have been raised in many states about machine tallies by showing that if the 2 methods, independent methods, give the same results, there's a high degree of assurance that that is an accurate result. It also is something that is transparent to the general populace. They can understand hand counting. And again, that's been another issue, is that the machines are not transparent.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that.
Would you, I'll acknowledge you, and just, let's not just have a two-way conversation here, okay? You're now I acknowledge you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the ballots, as they're coming in, there is a tally, and maybe you could call that a count, of the number of ballots prior to them being opened and the votes counted. So there actually is already a hand count being done of the number of ballots? So are you talking about a hand?
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
But would you answer his question, please?
The number of ballots is only the number of envelopes or ballots that have been received. It doesn't tell you what is on the ballot.
Correct.
It's the content of the ballots, of the various races, the various initiatives that are on the ballot that are the issue. And, for example, there have been objections in previous elections where a count for one candidate is attributed to a different candidate. And that's the sort of thing that is non-transparent in the machines, but would be very transparent in a hand count. So it's not simply the number of ballots that come in, it's the actual count of the contents of the ballots.
Any other questions? Yes.
Mr. Rob, real quickly, with regards to the audit in section 3, so it says right here, cost would be minimal as it is likely that local CPAs and business professional and professors and others would be willing to volunteer and assist in conducting an audit without a charge. Would you be willing to raise the ante on up the ante on that and maybe consider because I believe you said you're a scientist, right, by trade, right? Or in your former profession? Okay, I say this because I come from the street, you know, I from the Wall Street background, once upon a time. And most people don't know this, but Wall Street's not really comprised of like brokers that are, C7, you know, they have their broker licenses. No, they upped their game since the GFC, and they've been hiring scientists like yourselves and engineers. What would they be doing in a business or a finance background like that? Because they see more. They know how to break it, and something that's so know how to discombobulate something that's so not easy to interpret. So they use minds like that. Would you willing to up the ante and recommend, like, you know, scientists like yourself or engineers that would assist with the audit? You know what I mean?
I do know a few people locally who are CPAs and otherwise qualified. I would be more than happy to contact them and help organize such an audit. I mean, my commitment is to honest, accurate elections. And that's, you know, whatever it takes to do
Right,
that.
but you're a scientist, you're not a
I am.
CPA.
I'm
CPA
not
is
a
different,
CPA,
right?
No. No.
By trade, and by category, and by industry, correct?
Correct.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, scientists are trained to look at the data and to see what the data says.
Correct.
It's not an opinion, it's not an idea, it's not a feeling. It is, the data is the data. And that's really basically what auditors do, is they look at the data and see what story it has to tell.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? I think we're to the point where we have an election, we have a motion, it can be
You've got to.
Nicole, was your hand up? Did you have a question?
I wanted to throw something out there. Has anybody thought of maybe doing more of like in addition to instead of a full hand count, maybe an additional count of some precincts, maybe by this group?
Would you fill in a little bit more for, how would that take place?
Well, maybe in addition to the 1% hand count, there would be additional maybe precincts that this board could decide, and they could maybe just count those, maybe like an additional 10 precincts where you would pick the precincts and maybe do your, so it wouldn't be what do you call it? It's kind of a cross check, I guess it would be.
You mean it wouldn't be cost prohibitive to do the whole thing, but maybe do some sampling? Is that what you're saying, a sampling type?
That way you could do a validation.
What's your thought on that?
It's certainly a good suggestion if you don't want to go to a full hand count. Sampling surveys are something that are done routinely throughout all areas of science, and they can yield a good degree of validity to an election.
Well, it wouldn't be a survey, but it would be.
You're taking a sample, instead of the whole set of ballots, you're taking a subsample of 1,000, whatever, ballots, and using those results to estimate what the whole population looks like. So we're actually doing that right now with some of our investigations. And you can get, if there are problems, they generally can be detected if they are at sufficient magnitude that they would affect the outcome of the election. They're going to show up in a smaller sample. So yeah, so it would be very useful to do that. It's not quite as good as doing everything, but it's certainly far better than nothing.
I'm gonna hope I get supported by the committee here, but I don't want to, this election integrity improve the system. I don't want it sent the way it is now. But I think Nicole has some ideas, there's some good ideas that we can work on. I'd rather pull it off the agenda with the concurrence of the majority of my members, voting members, and bring it back. I think there's work to be done. I don't think we can go forward in the form that it is. There's more questions raised, there's good recommendations being made, whether it's in the audit area, whether it's a sampling area, but more has to be done to improve the election integrity that a lot of people are uncomfortable. At this point, I couldn't say everything is hunky-dory, everything's great. I'd be lying to myself and a lot of people that I know. So what I'd like to do is entertain a motion that we pull recommendation to improve election integrity from this committee. And then I'm gonna, if that motion passes, I have some legal questions I wanna ask county council. So is there a motion to pull item 3B2, recommendation to improve election integrity, from the agenda for future discussion?
So moved.
I have a motion made by Pamela. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Motion made and second. Is there any objection or discussion on pulling this item for now? Not, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. So we're going to pull this item. My legal questions are, in order to not lay fallow until September, October, November, December, whatever next year is, because we're not scheduled under our plan to meet until September, I believe. Is there a prohibition for two people meeting and discussing, perhaps like two members of our committee, taking one piece of this recommendation and discussing it, and then bringing it back to the September board meeting so that we're not doing nothing, just sitting and waiting until September?
No, Chair, and if you recall, our office had previously advised about ad hoc working groups that this committee could explore in the interim, given the periods between your meetings as set by the board. So I can follow up with you, or after this meeting, we can certainly connect about the working groups that you had previously expressed interest in.
Okay.
You can communicate that.
Thank you. I just want it confirmed for the record, so we just don't do nothing with this thing. All right. I'm going to move the agenda now. We have public comment. David, thank you so much. I appreciate your work and effort. Is there no public comment?
Through the chair, there was no cards filled out, so.
Oh, no. I can't see behind my head. Is there some?
Yeah.
Oh. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work done. Then we just can't just throw it under the bus.
You don't have a card?
Sorry, Carla, let me get you. And Mr. Amador, Carla would like a card as well. She didn't see them.
All right. The first card I have here is Holly Moore. Three minutes, unless we cheat a little bit. No. Are you hungry?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman Amador and board members. I have a news article, the first page that I'm passing around the room regarding hand counting as a matter of, actually, I'll get into it in just a moment. You'll see that the headline says it all. So we just started using ballot tabulators in precincts this last election, and when tabulators count ballots, did you know that they don't count ballots? The tabulators don't count ballots. What do the tabulators count? They count images or pictures of the ballots. This is very important. And in Georgia and Michigan, you have a Georgia article there. They found that pictures of ballots can be erased and therefore not counted. And you know what else they found in Georgia? The images can be multiplied. Like when you hit the copy button on a computer, you can do copy, 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 copy. So they'd find a perfect ballot that had all the right candidates on it and copy it hundreds of times. It's very sneaky and hard to find. We have the same tabulators, but before you say that can't happen here, remember we live in a zero trust system since the Shakir Khan case. The days of trusting machines are over. We need a tight system with every redundancy available to stop election fraud, and we want to double check everything, particularly the ballot count, because the ballot count is what counts, right? That's what we're counting. And this is why simple hand counting is so important. Sure, use the machines to do the initial tally, and later on send in the election results to the Secretary of State, but don't certify the election until every single ballot is counted by hand and has the same count as the machine count, because a parallel hand count double checks the machines. That's what we need. And we're told constantly by fake news that hand counting is bad and inaccurate. And like anything, there are good hand counting machines and bad ones, right? Hand counting systems, rather, and bad ones. There's a very good one that David referenced out of Missouri by Linda Rance, and she teaches hand counting courses online and has a manual. Linda Rance even has a calculator to estimate how much hand counting would be in a county. It's the fraction of the cost of the machines, it's about half to a third. And if you've been paying attention, you've seen all across the nation how election systems have been hacked into. You know, I mean, if NATO can get hacked into, of course our system gets hacked into. The most famous was when they hacked into a machine right in front of a judge using only a pencil. An election machine. And we need to back up our system to make sure that hacking isn't happening here, because we know that our election machines are connected to the internet. Certainly that's how you know 7 minutes after you voted that you voted, because they're connected to the internet. So counting paper ballots by hand can never be hacked, and it's extremely accurate. Hand counting is one of the ways that we can rebuild trust and put greater security in our election system. It must be implemented quickly, so I submit it as another suggestion for the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, 2 seconds early. All right, Melanie Knott.
Oh, I guess that helps. Chairman Amador, members of the Election Advisory Committee, and other members of the County Board, my name is Melanie Knott, and I'm a concerned citizen of San Joaquin County. On April 11th, 2024, the last meeting, I had the honor to provide a presentation of the issues regarding polling locations during our San Joaquin County primary presidential election. First, thank you for the privilege to speak to you regarding the matter of polling locations. This evening, I just want to take the opportunity to provide additional information to the Election Advisory Committee with a few recommendations that the committee might use to present to our San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors. 1, comprehensive training. 2, comprehensive training. 3, comprehensive training. I believe the ROV and its office would agree comprehensive training is vitally important. The ROV mentioned as a goal and a responsibility comprehensive training in the first introductory training video. I took part in that. I was a poll worker, and I witnessed her saying that she was going to provide us with comprehensive training. Despite that responsibility, we didn't see that goal come to fruition. It's heartbreaking to hear in the last meeting the talk of election officers, otherwise known as election poll workers, what we call volunteer citizenry, be blamed for being so poorly prepared to work the polls. Also, to hear poll workers reach out for help and call the hotline, only to encounter elections office employees uninformed and unprepared to address voters' concerns and questions. I'm reminded of the push for the Voter Choice Act It's not a good idea because that would only further remove well-trained poll workers, the citizenry, from the process of monitoring and ensuring free, fair, honest, and transparent elections. Elections belong to we the people of San Joaquin County. We want to be adequately and properly trained. So again, 3, comprehensive training. In that training include, what I would say, 4, the sheriff's hotline. When no satisfactory resolution at elections hotline, there should be a sheriff's hotline to contact. And 5, train poll workers. Ask for ID to verify legal and eligible voters. Thank you.
Thank you. These, I understand comprehensive training 1, 2, and 3, but do you have anything in written form that you could provide us as far as your recommendations?
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, maybe I'm not glad I asked.
Well, no,
Yes.
in talking with an election worker for the recall of 2021, this is what they were provided.
And
Okay, and it's a pretty thick manual. And I don't have anything to provide you from this last election. We didn't receive any manual like this.
okay, all right. Thank you. I'd like to kind of see that if you'll share it. But I am sure.
Sure.
Anybody else interested in it will get, I don't know if how we can get copies, but I think everybody would like that.
Sure.
Our next speaker, thank you so much, is Carla Hune.
Good evening, Chairman Amador and the rest of the people that are here. So I'm a little confused when I got the additional pages for the agenda today. So on March 6th, the day after the election, a letter came out from the ROV office through the Public Information Officer, recapped the primary election by stating, "We are pleased to report the processes ran smoothly during yesterday's elections and the polls opened right on time and we saw a steady stream of voters, et cetera, et cetera." And now I'm looking at the pages that are attached to this agenda and an analysis of the help desk tickets submitted by the election officers to the Registers of Voters help desk during the 2024 primary has revealed some few opportunities to improve the EO. Then also, it says poll pad logins and passwords. We received calls from EOs at nearly all polling locations with inquiries related to login issues. So how can the ROV office, the day after the election, say that everything went smoothly? It can't. So it leads me to why was that done? Was it not known, and how is that possible? They were all there on election day. And it just leads me to question some of the things that are going on. So then also on the voter maintenance, Experian Trust Trace. Have we been using that one? If we have, they've been doing, and excuse my French, a piss poor job. We still have people on the rolls that were born in 1850. Okay, we have long genes here. There was actually somebody found that voted before they were born that's on the rolls. So if this is the one, maybe we need to look for another one. So just, I put that before you, and thank you.
Thank you. Jody Graham. And that's our last public comment person.
Good evening. I just wanted to make a point of clarification, and maybe I misunderstood something. But in your first motion, I believe that you pulled the two items, number 2 and 4, which were giving instruction to the supervisors. And then in the second, when you pulled the next item, I heard it was just number 3. I never heard any discussion about the first recommendation that, to engage the services of one or more third-party entities to review the county voter rolls prior to the preparation of the list of
So
qualified voters.
let's stop our time. Let me just inform you. We pulled the whole packet for further review. We didn't dissect it and chop it up.
Okay,
pulled-
because I just heard the other numbers, but in the meantime, I'd like to just make a comment about that. We do have an election coming up, and this is the one, to me, that's the most time sensitive. We do have many problems with the voter rolls, people who are 121 years old voting. We have a lot of these problems, and we've got a presidential election coming up, and I just didn't hear any discussion or questions regarding this one that is not specifically giving instruction to the supervisors, but something that needs to be done in this county before your next meeting. This is imperative. We've got an election coming up, and we've got huge problems that are very well documented on the voter rolls. And there's ample evidence of that. So I just wanted to, that was the point of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. That concludes public comment, Registrar of Voters' comments.
I would just like to share a couple of things. I have some listed items, but we removed 32,000 people from active to inactive status before the March primary because they hadn't voted in the last two federal elections. So that did happen. The 1850 birth date, we have a dwindling number of folks that weren't required prior to 1971 to provide a birth date. I've watched that number very closely, and as long as it continues to diminish, we also had a staff member actually try to reach out to, I think there's like 30-something people still in that category. And so when I first started as the Registrar of Voters, I think it was upwards of 70 or 80. And so I'm watching that number decrease, and we are watching those particularly to address those. And I just want to add that in there. The True Trace is a new product that we are using. We actually have been instructed by our board to look at other counties and the things that they're doing to do maintenance and things like that. And so we actually got that from Orange County. And so this will be our first time utilizing True Trace, and we're going to do that before the general election. And then for the other items I wanted to share, I was at the Legislative Committee for Election Officials last week, and they shared with me that on June 4th, there's going to be some legislative hearings occurring at the state, and they're going to be looking at several election bills. So I just want to throw that out there if folks are interested. It's something that they can engage in at the state level. Additionally, we attended the Ezra Election Technology Conference in Los Angeles. And while we were there, we attended a panel. I did not. It was my Assistant Registrar of Voters, Mr. Diaz, and Lakshmi, our business analyst. And they were able to watch a presentation by a Dr. Justin Grimmer, who is a Stanford professor that has presented quite a bit on voter roll maintenance and has worked with a lot of officials in the state of California. So that may be of interest to folks to look into. And then I wanted to share today, we actually had a meeting with the city clerks. We do an annual meeting with them prior to election time. We had a great opportunity to meet a couple of the new city clerks and to have a great, robust conversation in preparation for the November election. And then finally, my last comment is the state is putting on some voter roll maintenance and National Voter Registration Act trainings for staff. And so I'm ensuring that all of our staff attends those, including myself, to make sure that we are doing everything exactly as we should. So those are just some highlights on what we'll be working on and what we're doing.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the Registrar of Voters? Because I have a couple of questions before we move on to committee comments. If no one else has any
Mr.
questions.
Chairman, I have a question for the registrar. In regards to the poll pads, on election day, I'm aware that the folks who came in and didn't bring a ballot with them, they gave their name and signed the poll pad. I'm also believe that poll pad has no way of verifying the signature that is made there on site. Is there any way for future elections that we could have that poll pad in some way, the digital signature that they make compared to the signature on file?
The only way to do that would to be have our full, our database, our IMES database, which is our election management system, available. The poll pad doesn't have that capability to do that. We do save all signatures are captured on the poll pad. Something that we want to drill down in the election officer training for November is to ensure the best thing that we can do is voter comes in, Tom Smith, they look up Tom Smith and they say, please confirm your address, and the voter can give the address, and that is one area where we can train the workers. That's really the only type of verifying that we can do without infringing on voter rights or state law, so that's something that can be done. So we're gonna really emphasize that in the training, but as far as signature comparison, being traditional polling place, we don't have that option.
One more question. In my personal life, my brother died in 2001. In 2002, at my mother's house, he received a ballot. Now, if my mom wanted to forge a signature, she might have been able to forge it and cast a second ballot. I'm aware that this last election, he's been taken off the rolls. I believe the reason he was not taken off the rolls is he died in Montana. He didn't die in San Joaquin County. Does that sound about right?
What was your question? I didn't
I'm
quite
trying to figure
understand
out-
the question
I'm
of
trying
her.
to figure out why he might have received a ballot even though he died in 2001.
So that is correct. In the state of California, we do not participate in ERIC. There's a lot of controversy around that, and that's a national database to allow us to get information across state lines. So until we get a formal notification in our office for somebody that has passed away, we don't just remove them from the rolls. And of course, if there was any evidence that that person cast a ballot after they passed away, then we would have a criminal investigation and we would be contacting the sheriff's office.
So that could be possible room for improvement.
Absolutely. Getting that information from across the country would require us to be a part of some sort of database, but that's something that's decided at the state level and not at our level.
Thank you.
Any more votes? Any more questions of the registrar of voters? I just have one comment. This Justin Grimmer, the professor from Stanford that you're talking about, I extensively researched him. And there's nothing in the world that is wrong with elections in his opinions. I've read a lot of his documentation, and there's nothing wrong with any election anywhere. And so, I mean, that's a general feeling I got. I'm just trying to balance it. I know you are positively impressed with him. Just to make sure that everybody just doesn't run to his presentations, he has a strong feeling about nothing is illegal in voting. I mean, so I wanted to ask you what true trace means.
It's a product from Experian, the credit reporting agency. So the California Elections Code allows us to use a credit reporting agency. We submit our names and addresses of the voters on our rolls, and they're able to give us back information if there's any credit reporting information that provides an updated address for any of those voters. So that's what it does.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the registrar of voters? If not, we'll move to our committee comments. The committee members have any comments?
I've
All
got
right.
some comments, sir. I just was pausing to see if anybody else did. I didn't want to step on anybody else's time. Mr. Chairman, as I think you know, I spent a lot of time on Election Day doing a lot of personal investigations. I was a poll worker, worked at an election office. And after the elections were over, I went down to the registrar's office. I watched the signature verification process live. I witnessed them catch a number of invalid signatures. My understanding, every single ballot that goes into a drop box, every single ballot that goes through the mail in the VBM system, goes through the signature verification process. And by my estimation, that is absolutely the best way to ensure that we have election integrity, provided that the voter rolls are clean. I know that you've taken 32,000 people off the voter rolls. That's excellent. We need to just monitor that, and it's an ongoing thing. Every month, every year, that has to be monitored, and we have to stay on top of the voter rolls. Otherwise, the VBMs and the drop box votes are going to be invalid also, or not following due process. The concern that I have is, oddly enough, the in-person polling locations where I was all day on election day, has a glaring problem, provided we don't trust the poll workers. If you get into a deep red area or a deep blue area or someplace where the poll workers wanted to collude, you could throw a whole bunch of ballots through the scanning machine, and those ballots have no way of determining who allegedly cast them. They're eventually going to get counted because they're going to go through the system without any checks and balances. The real loophole we have is at the polling location. And the experience that I have, I know that if somebody were very unscrupulous and had a cohort of maybe a dozen people, they could take a look at the votes that have been submitted VBM and turned in. They can compare that to the voting rolls and determine who has not yet turned in a vote by mail ballot. They can determine who is a low propensity voter and is unlikely to vote in this election. They can then take that information and share it with a dozen or more of their friends, walk into that polling location, identify themselves as Joe Smith at 123 Main Street, who they know hasn't turned in a ballot, they know is a low propensity voter, claim to be that person, scribble off a signature that is not verified live, so there's no way for the poll worker to know they're not Joe Smith at 123 Main Street, cast the ballot, and all of those ballots that are cast in that manner are going to get counted. Unless that voter actually turns in a VBM and the registrar catches it as a double vote, those fraudulent votes all get counted. And if you've got enough people at enough locations, the polling locations, the live polling locations with no signature verification is the weakest link we have. And I would strongly recommend we focus on that, as that's where I believe if there's going to be fraud in any magnitude at the level that could turn an election, that's where we should focus. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, schedule next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for September, I believe. Yes, September. And I was looking at the calendar, and this is according to the comprehensive plan. We can't have a meeting before then, but it doesn't preclude subcommittees working. Am I correct, council?
Yes, Chair, and we can follow up on the best way to go about
All
creating
right,
those working groups.
we'll get together on that. My suggestion is that it be
The second Thursday?
second Thursday, prefer? Okay, it is, that's great. That's exactly what I was thinking about. This must be a mind reader.
Well,
Second, it'd be kind of hard to be second Thursday if it's it would be the 12th, right? Is that,
correct.
okay. Unless there's an objection from the committee, we'll be adjourned until then, unless you're contacted by the chairman and you are volunteered your dainty bodies to serve on a subcommittee. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.